Hi, this is Dr. Bhavna Pandey, and my today's lecture is titled Strategic Manpower Planning. Strategic Manpower Planning. Okay, so in my last lecture, I had discussed about human resource planning, and if you just look at the definition again, what is human resource planning? It is planning for the right number of people at the right place, in the right time, at the right cost to ensure achievement of organization's goals. So HRP is focusing on the number of people and the type of people that the organization requires for achieving its goals, and it is also looking at the timeliness of actions, and also it ensures balancing the distribution and allocation of people so that the organization has a sufficient number of people with sufficient competencies in order to meet the goals of the organization. Now, strategic human resource planning ensures integration of HR planning with organizations' strategic planning. So when we talk about strategic human resource planning, the organization's strategy is now inbuilt with the concept of human resource planning. And so you are now integrating the HR functions, the HR planning with the organization's strategic planning. So looking at the meaning of SHRP, it is a dynamic, proactive, ongoing process. So it's not a one-time activity, and there is also flexibility. The strategies change with the dynamic changes that take place in the environment. And the definition specifically focuses on proactive planning. That is, it takes a proactive stance to meet the anticipated or unanticipated vacancies of positions that are critical for meeting the organization's mandate. Then SHRP also ensures that there are strategies related to recruitment, development, and retention of employees, so that the current and the future organizational goals could be met. Now, there are at least two reasons why strategic human resource planning is so important. First is employees are strategic resources. That is, the human resources, they can lend a competitive advantage to any organization. So if these resources, they are well managed and they are matched with the organization's strategy, then it could lead to the sustenance and to the survival of the organization. Secondly, it leads to improved goal attainment. Now, formulating strategy is important for attaining the organization goals, as it aligns the HR functions with the strategies of the organization, and it also focuses employees on the missions and goals of the organization. Now, there are some benefits of SHRP. First, it engages senior management in review of leadership talent. That means it involves senior management in identifying the leadership talent, as strong leaders are important to to the success of any organization. So it helps senior management to identify where the leadership talent is, and allow it to develop further. Then it also guides the developmental activities of key personnel. So, as I said, SHRP helps in identifying key executives, professionals, and managerial people, and organizes developmental activities for giving them an opportunity to grow further in the organization. Then SHRP assures continuity of leadership. Now it engages in succession planning, and which helps the organization to ready the candidates for assuming the higher roles in the organization. So it avoids the transition problems because candidates are ready to take up the higher roles, and it also audits the current workforce. So auditing the current workforce helps the organization to identify the kind of workforce is there in the organization in terms of numbers and in terms of competencies. And as such, the organization can invest in the resources and devise developmental strategies looking at the present workforce. Then it also fosters a culture of viewing humans as important resources. Now, any organization that engages in strategic planning will believes that humans, they are an important asset, and therefore it fosters a culture where humans are given a chance to grow. Then the SHRP also supports the overall mission of the department. So it invests in human capital potential, it invests in developing the knowledge, capabilities, and skills of humans, and this human capital in turn supports the overall goals of the department. Now, there are some key steps for undertaking strategic manpower planning. And first is demand forecast. So at this stage, when you're doing demand forecasting, that is, you are developing the future workforce profile of staffing levels and competencies needed to meet future functional requirements. So at this stage, you're looking at two things. You're looking at the workforce profile in terms of number and in terms of quality, the competencies that the workforce has. Right. So when you are doing demand forecasting analysis, you are doing demand analysis, it helps the organization to examine where it wants to grow in future, in which business it wants to invest in, and as a result, how will the work change and how will the work be done, what kind of changes will be there in terms of the tasks that will be taken and the workload of the people, whether there'll be more automation in jobs. So what will be the consequences of changes in work and in the workload, and how the work will flow in each part of the organization. That is, what will be the process of the work, what will be the different processes of work. So once what and how of future work is determined, the next step is to identify the competencies that employees will need to carry out that work. And the competencies can be defined either, it can be on organizational basis or on individual basis. So on organizational basis, there could be a few core competencies that could be applicable across different functions in the organization, like for example, communication skills, leadership skills, decision making skills, and so on. And on the individual basis, it could identify the competencies that are needed to carry out the functions that the individual is engaged in. So this set of competencies also, when you identify that these are the competencies that are important to the organization, so that this also gives a common understanding to the people that this is how they have to behave and this is what they have to value, and so it also helps the organization in taking decisions where recruitment and development and training, all these things are concerned. Now the next step is your supply projection. So now here it involves two steps: developing the present workforce profile and projecting that profile into the future. So once you have the workforce profile that you had worked out in the first stage, so once that workforce profile is prepared, now you also take into consideration the attrition rate, that is what is the rate of people quitting the organization. So when you are preparing the workforce profile, you also take this into consideration, and so in which department it is more high, or in which geographical area the attrition rate is less or high. So this also has to be taken into consideration. So as a result, you have the projected workforce supply in terms of staff and in terms of numbers and in terms of competencies. So when you prepare the workforce profile, there could be different items related to age, related to gender, location, preferences, experience of people, then number of employees, job classification, occupation, salary level, and so on. Then so all these things are there in the human resource database except for competencies. So for competencies, the organization could assess it in different ways, like either through performance evaluation reports or through the checklist method or through the employee's position description or the job class specification. And the third stage is your gap analysis. So when you have prepared the workforce profile and then you project that workforce profile into the future, so the result is that you have either there is a gap in the projected supply as compared to the forecasted demand, or there is a surplus, right? So when you have a gap, that is when the projected supply is less than the demand. So the different strategies that could be undertaken would be that the organization can go for hiring, it can train its people to assume roles that would be required in future, or it could engage in succession planning and so on. And in case there is the surplus, that is the projected supply is greater than the forecasted demand, then the organization could take up strategies like it could also go for layoffs, terminations, separations, or there are lateral transfers, or it was or retraining because maybe the workforce which is in surplus does not have the required skills to that are required in the future roles. So the organization could also retrain its people so that they could be redeployed in the changing roles. Now, the final phase of manpower analysis involves the development of strategy to address future gaps and surpluses. Now, this will ensure that the organization has appropriate staffing to meet future requirements. Now, some of the strategies discussed here are, like, for example, first is the job class modification. That is, the organization could either make some changes in the job specification and job descriptions. So, the organization can use a broadly described competency-based classification. So, this, when it is broadly described, the competencies are broadly described, and it helps employees in making transitions, and they could be used in a variety of roles. Then second is the compensation flexibility. Again, the organization could use a broadband approach, so that will give a flexibility to the organization to adjust the salaries within that range. Then thirdly, there could be the organization could engage in succession planning by following promotions from within approach. Similarly, the organization could also engage in devising strategies related to training and development of people, and the workforce could be trained in acquiring new knowledge and skills, keeping in pace the technological changes that are taking in the environment. Now, next we look at aligning the HR strategy to business strategy. So first, we'll see what is a strategy. Now, strategy is the formulation of organizational missions, goals, objectives, and action plans for achieving these objectives and goals, considering the competition and impact of outside environmental forces. So strategy is simply, it is the future course of action in order to realize the missions and goals and objectives of the organization, and also keeping in mind the environmental impact that can have on the organization. Then the goals that the organization defines should always be in measurable terms. It means the goals should not be vaguely defined. They should be realistic, they should be specific, and they should be time bound. Now, the organizations, there are different time frames for uh, devising strategies for making plans. The organization either could make short-term plans or mid-term plans or long-term plans. So it depends on in which environment the organization is operating in. There are businesses that work in very unstable environments. So there, the strategy of the organization is usually for a shorter term because of rapid changes in the in the environment, and so usually the organizations go for midterm planning, and there are arguments that why should one make strategies when anyways you have to make changes because of the unforeseen events. So my suggestion is that it is always good to make strategies because it gives a proactive stance to the organization, right? So maybe if you have if the strategy A fails, then you have strategy B and prepared, so you can take actions. So whenever the organization engages in strategic planning, it is always proactive. They rather than being reactive, they are proactive in their actions, and that gives them an edge over others. Now, there are different types of strategies. There are corporate strategies, business strategies, functional strategies. So, a corporate strategy is the overall strategy of the organization and its businesses. So, a corporate strategy could be the restructuring strategy, or it could be the growth strategy, or the maintenance strategy. The restructuring strategy is where the organization may either go for a complete turnaround, that is, they may just go into some other business which is completely different from their from what they were previously doing, or they could divest a portion of a unit, a business unit that was not giving them profit, or they could entirely liquidate or sell off the whole business. Then, in terms of growth strategies, the organizations can, they can go for growth strategies maybe in terms of revenue or maybe in terms of sales or market share. And there could be different ways because they can either go for incremental changes, means not very radical changes, but incremental changes, or the organization may intend to grow by setting businesses overseas, or they may uh, intend have a strategy to grow by merging with other organizations or acquiring other businesses. Then the maintenance strategy is that the company does not wish to make changes because it is happy with the status quo. Looking at the business strategy, now business strategy is the action plan for managing a single line of business. So corporate strategy is the overall strategy of the organization, whereas the business strategy is at the single unit of business. So and these strategies, they are adopted in order to strengthen the position of the organization in the market. So a group or um, a business could have multiple other businesses, and each unit may have their different strategies. So business strategy is at the business level. It is not at the group level, but at the single line of business it is looking at. So here an example is here, like for example, HDFC Bank, their overall strategy might be growth, but their individual businesses may have different strategies. Like for example, the banking business may have their strategy may be to provide a unique kind of banking to the customers, and their insurance business may have a different strategy, that is to cater to means they are going for low cost strategy as far as the insurance business is concerned. Now, when the organization has multiple businesses, there is a technique called the BCG matrix, which was developed by Boston Consulting Group. So it helps to analyze the strategies of the different business units. Now, this business BCG matrix, it has 4 grids. Like as you can see here, one grid is named stars, the other is question marks, third dogs, and cash cows. Now on one axis you have the relative market share, that is the x-axis is labeled as relative market share, and the y-axis it is labeled as market growth. Now the first grid, that is the star. So in this grid, the business that is operating in this grid means that the industry in which it is operating is growing fast. There is market growth, and at the same time, the business is also doing well. It is making profit. So the strategy might here would be that the business can go for further expansion because it is doing well, and the industry in which it is operating is also growing fast. Now, second is the question mark. Now, the question mark grid, it suggests that the market growth is high, but the business has limited market share and does not seem to capitalize the opportunity. Means it is operating in an environment where there is fast growth, but the business has limited market share. It is not being able to capitalize this opportunity. So the strategic options it has could be that it could either invest further because there is growth in the industry, or it could divest the business. Then thirdly, you have the grid named dogs, and the business that is in this grid is not profitable and it is not able to generate enough cash. So as you can see, it is in the grid where the market share is less and the market growth is also less. So the strategy here is that the business could be divested, it could be just sold off. Now lastly, you have the cash cow, that is the firms in this grid. They have relatively high market share in a market which is showing less growth. So the strategy would be to keep the cow healthy, that is to keep the business and capitalize on the large market share it has. Next we have the Potter's model. Now here Michael Potter has given 5 generic competitive strategies in which the organizations could compete. So the first strategy is the low cost provider strategy. So what is low cost provider strategy? That means the organization is the products are in low range and it is appealing to a broad range of customers. So for example, McDonald's. You could give the example of McDonald's here. Their products are not relatively on the higher range. They are quite reasonably priced, and it is also catering to a broad range of customers. Second, you have the best cost provider strategy. It aims to increase the quality of product or service while reducing cost. So you are getting best value for your money here. Third, the broad differentiation strategy, that is the company is making products or services that are different from the competitors, and so the customers, they are encouraged to pay a premium for that differentiation, for that uniqueness. They are willing to pay a higher price. And it appeals to a broad range of buyers. Now, for example, Asian Paints. Fourth, you have the focused or market niche strategy based on low cost. Now here the organization is offering low cost products or services to a select group of customers. So for example, you choose a regional program to market the product or the service to a particular ethnic group. Then lastly, you have the focused or market niche strategy based on differentiation. That means you are offering a niche product, and it again it is catering to a select group of customers. So, for example, you could cite Mercedes Benz here, right? The product is unique. It is a luxury item. It is not catering to a broad range of customers, but to a select few.